Let's move to our weekly feature now, where we unpack the top stories of the past 7 days. Joining us is a political analyst, Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, a social commentator, Nhlapho, UNISA Institute for Global Dialogue senior researcher, Mikatekiso Kubayi, as well, joins us for this conversation. Moving to you, Professor Breakfast, to set the lay of the land for us. So when looking at the ANC's National General Council, it surprised many by focusing on policy and issues around renewal rather than factional fighting or contestation as well. Let's speak about this. From your perspective, how significant was this moment for the ANC?
Well, the rationale behind the NGC is to do a midterm review, but also to examine at close range whether the leadership has carried the mandate from the rank and file, and also to examine issues of policy. But one of the things that rose to prominence with regard to the NGC was the National Democratic Revolution, given the fact that the SACP wants to contest by itself, and that is seen to be a threat to the NDR. And among other things, one of the decisions that was made was the fact that members of the Communist Party, they need to recuse themselves from strategic meetings of the ANC. But also there were other issues that were brought to bear, like how the ANC can improve its electoral performance and how the ANC can render services to the inhabitants at local government level, given the fact that the ANC has been dealt with a blow in a big way in recent general elections. So I think those are the things that come to mind regarding the NGC, and the fact that the GNU should continue. I thought it was going to be under threat, but there was no pushback or backlash.
Yeah. Nthabi, when ordinary South Africans hear the ANC speak about renewal and introspection as well, from your own perspective, do you see a genuine change within the party, or does it sound more like the normal rhetoric that we are used to coming from the ANC?
Well, I do want to say it is the normal rhetoric, but then again, it is expected that political parties will try to shield themselves, and they will always try to seem to be patching up whatever loopholes there are. So I think the way it went was necessary. However, the public has really lost confidence in the party itself, and a little more accountability may have been helpful for the party, because with the upcoming election, it might be local, but this is perhaps one of the most important local elections that the country has seen, because the last election we had the GNU, and with local elections before that, at least for the general public, it was quite obvious that the ANC would get a bit of an outright majority. This is not clear anymore, and so the ANC needed to show a picture of a party united, but I do believe a little bit more accountability and really addressing some of the serious issues that people on the ground, the voters, are actually concerned about, will go a long way for the party.
Mikateke, so it would seem that the ANC is looking to continuity, for lack of a better term. But from an institutional standpoint, what has repeated leadership instability cost the party, especially over years? And why is a continuity being presented as a solution at this point?
Well, my brother, continuity always, suggests a measure of stability. A continuity measure, suggests a retention of memory, institutional memory and capacity, and so on. That's what it essentially does. So whenever you want to do a change, you change for a reason. Either there's a lack of capacity, there's some wrongdoing that has been done. But at all times, what you want to do is to retain a measure, of stability and confidence, in the institution at all times. That is, essentially why you would want to consolidate that sort of continuity.
Professor Breakfast, it would seem that there is growing consensus, especially inside the ANC, that President Cyril Ramaphosa should finish his term or complete his term, something that very interestingly no ANC president has achieved since Nelson Mandela is done. Is this confidence in Ramaphosa or fear or even fear of further instability within the party?
Yeah, I think it's still early days. I don't think that the Ramaphosa faction should have a sense of triumphalism because there was no pushback from the audience or from the rank and file. There are many possibilities from now until 2027. In between, a lot can happen. So that's why I'm saying I think it's still early days. The mere fact that in the last NEC meeting, the president made closing remarks in a closed session. To me, that speaks volumes.
Yeah,
that are issues. People can be full of denialism and say this and that, blah, blah, blah. Remember, the ANC has made it its political culture to make sure that their presidents don't complete their second term of office. It has happened with former President Mbeki, it has happened with former President Zuma, and I don't think that, in my view, we should rule out that possibility, even with this one. Whether he's going to complete his second term or not, I think that is still up for grabs.
And Nthabi, let's speak about this from a public perception point of view. Does allowing Ramaphosa to finish his term then help rebuild trust, if you will, or has the ANC already lost too much ground with voters?
Well, it's going to take a bit of a miracle, really, for the ANC to rise up. But I do think having a president finish his term is a positive result. However, the public is really has lost a lot of confidence in the ANC, particularly the president. And this has been worsened by what we have seen this year, particularly from 6 July, with those allegations from Nhlapho that came up, and we got to hear things that we'd never heard of before. And before, as a country, as a people, we looked at corruption as a bit of a financial crime. And now the Matlanga Commission of Inquiry, as well as the ad hoc committee, have really exposed things beyond just financial crimes. They've exposed criminal activity alleged, and they've exposed even possible murders of whistleblowers and many things that have really gripped the nation, but also they've brought fear into the hearts of people, and people are left wondering, has the president done enough to address these issues? Is it possible for these issues to be addressed? And will we ever live in a country where we are feeling safe, with many South Africans saying they are scared to even stop when they're being stopped by vehicles in blue lights. So there are really a lot of issues that need to be addressed, and whether it's possible for the ANC to address them will be a very, very difficult task, but we can only wait and hope for the best.
Mikatekiso, succession discussions were officially discouraged at the NGC meeting, yet potential successors were already being mentioned. The name of Togo Didiza and Fikile Mbalula even coming up. Can the ANC then truly separate renewal from succession politics, if you will?
Well, the tradition of the ANC, is that conferences focus on the content, ahead of, whoever it is that you choose, to go and carry out that content. So it comes as no surprise, when officially the African National Congress discourages, this conversation about, succession, who's going to be president, who's going to be this, that, or the other, and focus more, on precisely what my co-panelists, have said, the challenges that are affecting society today. Focus on that first. Then, look among, the membership of the ANC and select the best among us. I think, many in the African National Congress will remember this principle. the selection or the deployment of the best among us, for a particular task. That has been the tradition of the ANC. But be that as it may, I mean, human beings are human beings. They will, discuss, things that they find interesting. They will chat, among themselves. If they think, oh, maybe there's a potential for a first woman president, maybe they'll have a conversation about that. You can't really, quite, prevent that. But officially, the NGC, is meant to discuss, a review, a midterm review of the ANC, of its policies, challenges affecting the country, stumbling blocks to implementation of policy, and so on. It's about content, it's about, implementation of decisions. And the effectiveness of the party machinery to that particular point, that midway point, not about succession.
Professor Breakfast, you mentioned the name of the SACP earlier on. And I must say the ANC has taken a firmer position on the SACP's decision to contest elections independently. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end, especially for the Tripartite Alliance as we have historically known it?
My reading of the situation is that if the SACP forges ahead and stands by itself, it will be the end of the Tripartite Alliance. Because what brings them together is the National Democratic Revolution, that there's got to be a time whereby the revolution is led by the ANC, which is the leader of the alliance, while the working class is being made ready to take over. So the argument of the SACP is that when are we going to have this transition whereby the working class leads the second phase? But of course, there have been also discontent about the GNU and so on. So the argument I'm making is that if the SACP stands by itself, then it will be the end of the alliance. And I don't agree with the argument that, by contesting elections, the SACP is not contesting the ANC. It is contesting the ANC because they are going to split votes.
Nthabi, going back on the professor's remarks as well, COSATU, for instance, and the SACP, they have complained about being sidelined in this arrangement, particularly in regions like Tshwane, for instance. How politically dangerous then is it for the ANC to alienate its traditional allies, especially ahead of such a much anticipated election next year?
I think you've used the correct word that I would also use, that it is quite a dangerous and dicey situation because previously in the past, talking about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, ANC had so much support that they could afford to alienate their allies. But this is really not the time because South Africans are largely unhappy with the ANC. Yes, many of them do say they do not see alternatives to the ANC. And so we've heard many people saying, although they do not have an alternative party that they'll be voting for, they'll certainly be going to the polls to vote against the ANC. And so I think this is a time for the ANC to really sharpen its swords and really make peace, or rather just bring their allies much closer, because at this point, at this juncture, they need their allies more than ever. So I definitely think it is quite a dangerous move, but perhaps the party has a plan around it. However, I think it might not be the best idea at this moment.
Mr. Kubayi, we've heard the likes of Gwede Mantashe speaking over the issue on dual membership. But if dual membership is indeed scrapped, what are the real consequences for governance, especially for SACP members who are currently serving in government positions?
Well, remember that, my brother, that serving in government, is at the invitation of the president, right? That's the preserve of the president. He picks, or she, if you have a female president, she would, as well choose, the team that he or she feels, will do the job, at that point in time. So ideally, you would, expect, that a team would come, solely from, your own political party, should, by your political party win the majority, and so on. But in this case, for instance, you have, a whole host of parties in the GNU, forming that. And even if the ANC, for instance, was to win, a majority in the council, in province, national, and so on, the president can still, or at least the premier, or the mayor, the party can still decide, if it feels, that somebody is better suited, to perform a particular task. Like I said earlier, I mean, the tradition of the African National Congress has always been to first, evaluate. Yes, many mistakes have been made. I mean, the country knows it's well on record, right? Many mistakes have been made, but the tradition of the African National Congress, which I think is correct, has always been to first evaluate, the circumstances that you are in, and then scan to see what the talent pool is, and then from that talent pool, select the best among. Right? That has been the tradition of the ANC, and I suspect that if the African National Congress was to stick, or return, to that sort of principle, things, would quite, shape up well. The country is starting to show signs, of recovery, here and there. I mean, there are positive, signs, in the economy and so on. In governance, and so on, and it has to, sustain that. It has to, take, citizens into its confidence and say that, look, this is what we're actually able to achieve when we've been able to fix this, that, and the other. These are the challenges that we're facing, and which is what the NGC is essentially about. Reviewing, the circumstances, reviewing the challenges, reviewing the tools, at hand to address the challenges, and then, by taking decisions or making recommendations as to, what is to be done, to achieve the outcomes that the party wants.
Well, if you'll indulge me, we'll continue this conversation in a short while. Also speaking to Julius Malema, reaching out to the SACP. This could suggest a political shift or of alignments and could reshape opposition politics ahead of the 2026 local government elections. A quick reminder that joining us for this discussion is Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who's a social commentator, political analyst, and Nthabi Nhlapho, UNISA Institute for Global Dialogue senior researcher. Mikatekiso Kubayi also joining us for this discussion. Do stay with us. Again, and thank you for staying with us. We continue our discussion, recapping some of the top stories that unfolded last week, and of course looking at the ANC's NGC meeting, which we saw play out in the East Rand. But also taking some of your views on this conversation alongside our panelists as well. I want to quickly take a call from Sanele in Mnambiti. Sanele, you've joined us on the line for this discussion. Give us a sense of some of the issues that are catching your attention on this discussion.
Thanks very much, Nhlapho, and greeting to all your panelists. One, Nhlapho, let me appreciate the decision that made by the SSAP. Actually, it was long overdue, but now it's upon the SSAP how they will drive this decision to make it practical to the voters. And then the SSAP, I want the panelists just to clear for me this thing. How will the SSAP describe itself? Because all along we were understanding that when it comes to the affiliation parties or when it comes to the elections, SSAP are the part of the Tripartite alliance that includes the ANC. And to the ANC, from the NGC, I don't understand practically, is it the principles of the ANC that are problematic to the voters, or is the individual ANC participants, the MPs, that are failing to apply holistically the ANC principles so that ANC can be the party that you can be trusted? And secondly, if the ANC is now, because it is the ANC that is moving away from the Tripartite Alliance, with what the ANC has guaranteed got from the voters on the last election, what is in the ANC mind? How are they going to survive? Because who is the ANC within the ANC? Because on my understanding, I understand ANC is the Tripartite Alliance. And again, to COSATU, what does this mean? And to all the other unions. Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you so much. Let's also get Lesego from Tembisa to add her voice to this conversation. Lesego, what's on your mind this evening? Lesego, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, Lesego, what's on your mind this evening? Welcome.
You are working on me.
Lesego, you are on the program. Can you hear us clearly? What comment or question do you have this evening?
in Witbank, the 4 chiefs died in Witbank.
Okay, let's move on. Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, I'll go back to you and maybe touch on what Sanele spoke about earlier, saying that how does the SACP then describe itself outside of the ANC? But maybe to extend that question as well, before we went to the break, I did mention the name of Julius Malema. He says that, or he has reached out to the SACP, also suggesting a political realignment or shift in anticipation of the local government elections next year. Maybe give us your sense of that as well.
So you are raising two issues. So first things first, how does the South African Communist Party defines itself outside the Tripartite Alliance?
Yeah.
The SACP is an independent organism. I'm not a spokesperson of the Communist Party. I'm just analyzing it. So the SACP is an independent political party with a ideological framework of Marxism and Leninism, which is a class analysis. So its agenda is that of pursuing a socialist model of development. However, at a strategic level, it has a partnership with the ANC and COSATU, and COSATU is the school of the working class, and the ANC is the leader of the National Democratic Revolution. So I guess it is within their right to go separate ways with the ANC if they want to. However, I think that will be the end of the Tripartite Alliance, in my view. Then the second point is about this partnership, or this idea that Malema was pitching to journalists, that he wants to reach out to the Communist Party. Now, the rationale behind, you see, you must remember, the EFF is also the Communist Party. The EFF is a Communist Party because the EFF is also a vanguard. The EFF subscribes to Marxism and Leninism as well, but the difference is that both of them are using class analysis, but the difference is that the EFF believes that class and race are like two sides of the same coin. The Communist Party, on the other hand, believes that race has always been a historical function of capitalism. So there is a nexus between the SACP and the EFF. No wonder Malema was pitching the idea that he wants to reach out to the Communist Party.
Nthabi, for the sake of time, I want to bring in a new issue as well, and that's over the ANC conference in Tshwane. And Eugene Modise being re-elected unopposed despite a forensic report against him. We will have him on this program a bit later on, but what does this then tell us about issues around accountability versus loyalty within the ANC?
I think this is a big talking point among the public, particularly the fact that, I mean, with last week we saw Fikile Mbalula saying that 3 NEC members of the ANC were on step aside, but many people did argue that 3 is a small number, and there seems to be accountability issues within the ANC wherein members who are accused of wrongdoing, and an accusation should be enough for the party to say, let's wait and see the outcomes of these allegations against said member. But this is also something that has happened many times in the past, that members of the ANC have been accused of, be it corruption or whatever the case may be, and they still manage to get into seats of power. So this is really not something new, but it is something that concerns the public. It's also something that does not necessarily signal what we are hearing. So the actions do not seem to be matching the words that we are hearing about accountability, renewal, and the party really taking steps to ensure that people who have allegations against them are not actively involved in daily politics. We saw the same thing happening with the Minister of Police, who recently stepped aside, but it was very reluctant. It wasn't something that was done with immediacy. It was done at the public's outcry mostly. So issues like that will certainly harm the party with the next local government elections.
Yeah. Mr. Kubayi, factionalism, court battles, and even leadership contests continue at provincial and regional levels within the ANC. How much do these internal struggles, how do they undermine the ANC's ability to govern, really?
You know, that's a very important question. I'll put it this way. I feel, as a researcher, on issues of development, South Africa, at its current level, of growth, at its current level of development, can't afford to dilly-dally on decision, on implementation, and so on. So it needs, thorough, proper planning, long-term, medium-term, planning, with, quick, implementation and actual implementation. We cannot afford, to dilly-dally and, waste time and so on, because the rest of the world is not waiting for us, right?
Sure.
So the idea of consistency, the idea of getting the best people to do a job, and getting proper plans and actually implementing it. That is what the country really needs to work on right now. I feel.
Yeah.
And I think the ANC is well capable of actually delivering on that. It's got a huge talent pool. It has no shortage of ideas. It has no shortage of skill. But the country has witnessed a whole host of challenges of corruption, etc., and really presenting a different picture, that is, something that is of, tells a story of a different political party than, what, it has historically, essentially been. And so on. So factionalism, the country really does not have enough time, does not have the time to deal with. It needs people on the ground want decisions. They want implementation, they want action, they want a governance. There's the examples here and there of improvement in governance, improvement in performance of the economy, and so on and so forth. Small, but you need to accelerate that. Yeah. And for that you need stability. The country can't afford to be, debating, the proficiency of factions, one way or that, which faction is better than which, that we can't afford that. We need to move forward. We need, I would agree with the ANC if it says that, okay, fine, look, we have to unite and make sure that we, eliminate as many hindrances as possible to, the implementation of decisions of this NGC. Its purpose, is to review, the environment, review policy, review, the circumstances, the issues, scan, possible solutions, scan possible hindrances to solutions, for the purpose of actually delivering, improving on performance. That is what the focus has to be, not on factions, and so on, people pulling this way and, the other. The country can't afford that.
The country can't afford that. Professor Breakfast, turning to traditional leadership matters, two Abatembu royal houses are now calling for King Buelekaya Dalingebo to be removed, this following his visit to Israel recently. I want to ask this to you. Where should the line be drawn between cultural authority and political positioning?
Yeah, that's a very dicey situation, because I think the straw that broke the camel's back was the visit of the king to Israel, and that did not sit well with some people in some quarters. Even the EFF, I think they've terminated his membership, according to the leader of the EFF. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. This is a very complex situation. But I think one should have been circumspect there, because this is a very complicated matter between us and Israel and Palestine. And for him to endorse Israel, I think it really rubbed some people in the wrong way.
Nthabi, to extend this, Julius Malema, for instance, has maintained a relationship with King Dalingebo while also rejecting his pro-Israel stance. Let's speak about this. How does this balance between a political principle and pragmatism, if you will, how does it land with the public?
I think, it is, like my colleague said, it is quite a complex issue of balancing different issues. And over time, we have seen the issue of South Africa and Israel become more and more spoken about. And it's starting to influence people on the ground as well, just in terms of with this particular issue now, you have a situation where even EFF members, for example, have to then decide which side do they go with. Do they agree with Malema's stance? And, we've got now a situation where traditional leadership and politics is, I want to say, at loggerheads with each other, but then also the stance of the country as a whole is at loggerheads with some people who may be in leadership in different facets, for example, in traditional leadership, in politics. And we are at a point where we are having to make a decision as a country as to where our stance is. But is that enough to then take away what the political parties themselves, the traditional leaders themselves, want to align themselves with? So it really has become a bit of a battle between the values of the country as a whole and the values of parties, and then the values of individuals as a whole. So definitely I am seeing a lot of issues around Israel, around relations within traditional leaders, within politics, but also within the international world. We've seen what happened with Donald Trump, and a lot of people saying it's got a lot to do with our relationship with Israel. So this has really become an issue that is affecting the country in so many facets. So I think we're going to have to wait and see how it plays out. It will take a few months, perhaps some years, for us to get to a point where we are stable and the issue of Israel is no longer affecting South Africa as deeply as it currently is.
Mr. Kubayi, as we wrap up, for South Africans who feel politically exhausted and disconnected as well, I mean, it is almost Christmas. What do this week's developments really mean for everyday lives?
There are a lot of things that have happened over the last week, my brother. The one that I think we should not forget is what Statistics South Africa has said about poverty levels recently. That for the first time again they're starting to actually reverse. We are starting to reverse that tide. Not too long ago, there was. I saw a headline about improving consumer confidence in the economy. We've had little shoots, green shoots of progress here and there. You're starting to see SOEs that are starting to do a little bit fare a bit better than they once did. You have stability of the grid. You have a government that is saying, look, we have to for us to get to the root bottom, the root cause of corruption, or the bottom of corruption, we have to have commissions such as painful as they may be, right? We need to literally identify exactly what it is that is causing all of this, so that we can arrest those that need to be arrested. Right now, if for example, the outcomes apparently the interim report will be confidential still, but if society could see some sort of action being taken out of resulting from the outcomes of the Matlanga Commission, that would be a good thing. That would build confidence. It would match with some of the developments that the likes of Statistics South Africa are starting to to report on. Some of the good news that these official state agencies are reporting on. So there's both a mix of good things and a mix of bad news all in one. We've been very successful. We've just come out of a very beautiful and successful G20 summit, or G20 presidency, for that matter, and we should and a lot of hard work. South Africans came together, they pooled resources, they worked really, really hard, to deliver, on this, major national project. I think that's the sort of message that you want to send to South Africans, that together, South Africans pulling, everyone pulling their weight together, we can do something, for this country.
So I'll also get final thoughts from our other two panelists as well, as we continue this conversation in a short while. Do stay with us. Hello again, and thank you for staying with us. We continue our discussion right now, unpacking some of the stories making news this week. We speak to Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who's a political commentator. Nhlapho is also with us for this discussion, as well as the UNISA Institute for Global Dialogue and senior researcher Mikatekiso Kubayi. Prof, I will continue with you, Professor Breakfast. In one sentence, from what we've discussed, and also in this week, what one word can best describe the week that was, especially when it comes to some of the stories that we've discussed pertaining to the NGC? Is this a moment of renewal? Is it a managed survival? Or is it a postponed crisis for the ANC that we're seeing here?
One word to...
Well, not one word, but a phrase.
A phrase. Yeah. I think it's an interesting turn of events, for the ANC to take stock of what has happened in the past. But there seems to be, I don't know, a commitment on their end to make a change for the better. But normally it's a commitment in theory, not in practice. But there are two possibilities for the ANC. It's either they go one level up or one level down. I think this time around they have to make a change for the better if they want to bounce back to power.
Yeah. And Nthabi, looking long term, are the shifts that we've discussed so far signs of democratic maturity for South Africa, or warning signs of a deeper political stress here, especially in the year ahead, looking ahead of the local government elections?
I think it's absolutely a positive time for the country, particularly the voters. And the reason I say this is because we've had a very difficult 6 months as a country, a lot being revealed. But that has forced South Africans to get involved. It has forced us to get to know what's happening in our country. It has forced us to think seriously about the future of the country and the country that we want to leave for our children. So I definitely think there are signs of renewal, not necessarily from a particular party, but they are from South Africans. South Africans are hopeful. South Africans want to get involved. And South Africans care a lot more now than they ever did before. It seems everybody is agreeing on one thing, all political parties included, that we want to fix this country. And that, I think, is a very positive sign.
Thank you so much. Let's also get some of our viewers to add their voice to some of the issues that we've discussed as well before we go to break. Ali Ntsakane, give us a sense of what you're thinking this evening.
A quick one. I think I agree with SACP reasons for breaking away from ANC, but I think they are going to come out empty-handed. Local government elections are a very difficult space, and they have rallied for very long behind ANC. They've got nothing to show to the communities on the ground. What is it that they are going to offer? They are not going to come out with anything, even though their reasons are valid.
Let's also go to Thoyando right now and speak to Jeffrey. Jeffrey, you've got the last bite. What's on your mind? Inda.
Ndikusadam Jeffrey Masotapa Muchatel. Thank you very much for the African National Congress, for the National General Council. Ndilone zangano dilothelendra kono libona lichikuita that mitangano yonotonga yenila NGC ngotoralo une othe Africa rifarki saluta organization ya ANC uita mitangano torala uri community zaborine bathu bene ra ri kono to pfa zwavhuḓi nga ndila dzoṱhe dzo teaho ri kono vhona zori organizations vha tshi kono tshimbila nga ifhio nḓila bashi vhanga.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey in Thoyando, also giving us his final thoughts as well. Let me quickly go to Mr. Kubayi as well to give us his parting shot as we end up the conversation. 2026 is coming up. A lot can be said about contestation ahead of the local government elections. What's your expectation?
Well, I wouldn't like to speculate, about electoral outcomes there, but what I do know, what that is certain is that society wants implementation of decisions. They want, turnaround, in their daily lived realities, and so on. And, all political parties, especially those in government, need to, pull their socks up, and deliver for the country. There was a caller that asked, if there's an issue with decisions or issues with the policies or issues with the people to implement the policies. Well, corruption, that we're dealing with every day, says that, it's not an issue of policy, it's an issue of people that are supposed to be implementing on the ideas, that have already been tabled and passed and adopted and so on. Has to be stopped, as soon as possible, so that decisions can flow, so that implementation of policies can flow, can work better. The country cannot afford really to be dragging its feet, any longer. In fact, it hasn't been able to afford that, for quite some time, already. The world is moving, it's leaving us behind. And we want to be able to catch up, not only catch up, but also take up our proper place, in the board. And to do this, we have to stem, corruption very thoroughly, and the state is demonstrating that it's looking at, doing precisely that and getting
Mr.
to
Kubayi,
the
unfortunately,
bottom,
we have run out of time and need to wrap up this conversation.
But that's what we need to do.
Thank you so much. Wrapping up our very insightful conversation there, I've had Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, a political commentator. We've also had Nthabi, as well as UNISA Institute for Global Dialogue senior researcher Mikatekiso Kubayi, wrapping up some of the week's top stories. We bring you more news and updates at the top of the hour. Do stay with us.